Hi, I'm Curious Cass, and this is Curiosity Junkie. Today's guest is an author, world traveler, and a Reiki healer. Please welcome Kristi Duarte to the podcast. Hi, Kristi Duarte. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Cassie?
I'm fantastic. I want to say thank you so much for coming on the Curiosity Junkie podcast to talk about your new book, basically, is what we're going to be spending time talking about. But we're also going to talk about your world travels and a little bit of spirituality. So let's jump in. I know you've traveled all over. And I want to know what drew you to the travel.
So when I was a kid, when I was a child, I grew up in Sweden. My parents were Estonian, who came to Sweden during the Second World War as small children. And so my dad had his own company. So we would, during vacations, just travel through Europe by car. And he would visit his business contacts and things like that. And so by the time I was 11 or something, I had already been to 20 countries. Wow. And part of it is also because we were refugees, or my parents at least were refugees, it was always a kind of rootlessness. So we didn't belong anywhere. So even I when I was 19, I moved to England by myself. I lived in London, studied art. And then I just wanted to see more. So I think a lot of people who travel feel like you see one place, you want to see more. You go to another place, you want to see even more. Once you've been to 20 countries, you want to see 30 countries. Well, when you've seen 30 countries, it's like, okay, where haven't I gone? And also I think that because I always read books I was fascinated by books about other cultures. So I read about people in South Africa, the whole apartheid thing, right? I read about people in China. I read about India. So I wanted to go there. And that's really what also inspired me as a person. The thing that drove me to write books about, which we're going to come to later, about religion, but that I'm always curious. You're the curiosity junkie. Right. I'm also the curiosity junkie. My husband always says oh my God, you want to go everywhere? And I'm yes, I do. Anywhere is interesting for me.
Absolutely. And I do think that is the beauty of books. It introduces us to different worlds, sometimes imaginary and sometimes real, that we have a longing to go to. So I think it's beautiful that young you discovered the books that made you want to travel, along with you kind of had the nomad growing up lifestyle. It's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the spirituality side, and I'm guessing that's what drove you to write about religion, as you must have somewhere along the line had a passion for really understanding it.
I always had connection to spirit. So even as a small child, there were insights I got, about time not existing, about I would see lights sparkle somewhere, and I would say oh my God, look at those fireworks, and people were there are no fireworks, and I'm but I can see it, and I'm there it is again, and they're no, there's nothing, and things that I couldn't understand. I had a spirit in my room who slept next to me and would breathe, and never scary, doors would open and close and stuff like that, stuff, but people, I think my friends just thought I was making it up. Anyways, fast forward to when I'm in my mid-20s, my parents passed away in a ferry accident. It's the biggest peacetime accident in Europe. So a ferry between Sweden and Estonia sunk, and my parents passed away. And that kind of speeded up my spiritual development, because then as they were in spirit, they would, it's just like really crazy. Okay.
I love it though. Fascinating. I love it.
So they would like come and make themselves known, not just to me, to my two sisters as well. So in different ways. And so when I came to New York, when I was in my early 30s, then I happened upon a channeler called Alex Murray, a famous channel in New York City. And he taught me channeling, like connecting with spirit. So I could kind of like do it consciously instead of like just getting messages here and there.
Yeah.
And as like that paired with like the traveling, right? So like at the same time, I'm going to India, I'm going to Syria, I'm going to like all these different countries where people have different religions, and whether it's like Hinduism or Islam or it's Buddhism or you know, Christianity or whatever, you see that people everywhere in the world are inherently good, right? And then that got me thinking about why is there like so much hatred and fear of each other in the world? Why can't we, like, if we would just travel or go or read books or even watch movies, right? If we weren't so like, okay, I'm in my little box and what I believe is right and everything else that everyone else believes is wrong, if we could just like bring all that together, we would see that we're all really similar everywhere in the world. Like we look different, we dress differently, but we're like inherently, I mean, most people are inherently good. I think, yes. I would say like 99% of people are good. And then there's a few that for different reasons are not. So I had all that, like all these experiences and thinking and wanting to write about, like my original idea was to write a nonfiction book about like religion, like how they were in the beginning and what changed, how these rules came about, and, you know, just to show that. And instead, that didn't happen. So instead, like one day when I was in India with my husband, we were traveling and I saw this book about Jesus in India. I didn't pick it up at the time, but I was like, wow, this is really fascinating. And a few years later, I was on my Kindle app on my phone in the subway, and I realized at some point I had bought this book called The Secret Life of Jesus Christ, which is written by a Russian explorer in 1882, I think, somewhere in the 1880s. Which is the Jesus in India thing, right? So the story. So he traveled through India. He ended up in northern India, in Kashmir. He broke his leg. He had to stay in this in this Tibetan monastery. And this monk showed him this book, these scrolls that told the story about Jesus in India. So that he wrote into a book, right? Which tells the story of the so-called lost years, where, you know, that are not included in the Bible. Anyway, so I'm reading this book and thinking like, wow, this is really interesting. This is something I want to write about. Like finally, I found like my subject, because I had written books before, but they were kind of like, like training books, like training wheels, you know, like I wrote them, I did nothing with them. I read through the New Testament. I like crossed out pages where I was like, oh, this is not spiritual at all. I started like places where they were, I thought was like very of God, like the thing that, you know, what comes from love and what is somebody saying like, I didn't like you doing that, so I'm going to put a rule against it, right? Right. That's, of course, that's my perception. You know, and I'm not saying that I am right. I'm just saying this is my perception, and this is what guided me through writing this. So I ended up spending 7 years writing a book called The Transmigrant, which is about Jesus traveling through India, Asia, studying Hinduism and Buddhism, and very much like brings all these religions together. Of course, not Islam, because Islam came 700 years later. But yeah, that's how I came to write about religion. It was like more of a, like, how do we go to the core of all faiths and compare them to each other? And what would Jesus have been like if he was not the one God's son, if he was one of God's sons? And what would it be? So that's where I got started.
I love that. I like that you have kind of discovered, and this is my philosophy on this piece too, is that it's about love, and we really are all one. And there is, I want to say, and I don't know if I pronounce his name correctly, Thich Nhat Hanh. He has a quote, "The opposite of what you know is also true." And when I read that, I just remembered my mind just kind of like opening up and going, I've never thought about how limited my knowledge of the world is. And I'm with you. I think that if we required young people to travel early, they would be more accepting and less afraid of the unknown and what we're taught to believe about the unknown. So I'm a huge fan of, like, can we just implement that? And you graduate from high school and then you should go travel.
Yeah, I mean, that would be ideal. Of course, like, not everyone has the possibility to do that. And I mean, for me, yes, I'm fortunate because of all these different things that have happened in my life. But I also, like, growing up, I would not go partying, for example. I would save my money because I was like, oh, if I save, I can go on a trip. So it's also about prioritizing. But what I wanted to say, like, if you can travel, what you can do is connect with people who are different than you in your own community, because there are always, I mean, in the United States especially, I mean, you always have people, like a Christian can meet with a Muslim and they can just talk about it, or a white person with a black person, or with a Hindu, or whatever, like somebody who's different, to just like find the commonalities. And I mean, I definitely believe what, like, you believe, like, you know, it's all about love. Like, the original foundation of religions was love, you know, love one another, help one another. And I also believe that we are all one with God.
When you were talking about that, staying local, it came to mind when I was doing a conversation on budget talks, and the gentleman was saying we would get everybody with different beliefs. Now, this is politics, but different beliefs, and do like town hall. And I think if we thought about that, or really exploring different cultures and just bringing communities together, what a beautiful thing that would be, like just learning about each other.
Yeah, and I also agree with, I also don't know how to pronounce his name.
No. I don't know if it's
every time I'm like, Chichnang. Yeah,
I know.
him who I adore.
Me too.
There is, like, I think it's so important to just acknowledge that there is no one truth. There is no one truth. You can have a perception and you can be drawn to something, but you are never completely right and nobody else is completely wrong.
Very well said. I like that a lot. Yes. Okay, so let's jump into the book, The Holy Conspiracy, and what was your driving force in writing this, or the message that you really wanted to send and hope that people get out of this book?
So the Holy Conspiracy appeared as an idea in the beginning when I was researching for the transmigrant, because I was reading through the Bible and I'm like, there's this story in the Bible about how the Apostle Paul did not get along with the disciples, Jesus's disciples or Jesus's followers, how there was this Jerusalem assembly. There was this congregation of Jesus's disciples, followers living in Jerusalem, led by Jesus's brother James, and secondarily about Peter. And then the Apostle Paul did not get along with them. And they were kind of like at war at each other. And I'm like, why doesn't anyone talk about this? I mean, this is such a huge story. So I started, after I finished the Transmigrant, writing the Transmigrant, I started looking into it. There are like nonfiction books written about it. And there are books written about Jesus's brother James, but nobody had written this story about the war between the Apostle Paul and the disciples. When you really look into it, you realize that the Apostle Paul is the founder of Christianity, that the disciples and Jesus's followers and Jesus's message got lost. Because, of course, when you dig into it, the Apostle Paul never met Jesus. He saw him in a vision, right? He fell down in on the road to Damascus. He had this vision about Jesus coming to him. And then instead of going to meet with the disciples, he went to Arabia for a few years. Then he went back to the northern part, like northern Israel, Lebanon, like Syria kind of like area.
Right.
And then he taught Jesus's message to these people without having met with the disciples. So he never got the Jesus message. He developed his own idea of what it was, what Jesus was, and maybe he met somebody, some of the disciples somewhere, or somebody who had met the disciples or something. So he had a little bit of a story. So then he went down to Jerusalem after 7 years and met with the disciples, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, Jesus was not the Messiah. He was like, we're all sons of God. So the Holy Conspiracy is kind of showing the division between what became Christianity today, the one that I feel is a lot of the time, not always, of course, but a lot of the time is focused more on hate and division, and we are better than you, when if you're not exactly like this, then you go into hell, versus what I believe that Jesus thought, which was God loves you, whatever you do. You can be a tax collector, or you can be a prostitute, or you can be like a leper, or you can be whatever you are, wherever you came from. God loves you, you're worthy, you're one with God, right? So there are two completely different messages there.
Yes.
That's the story I wanted to tell. And so that's the message of the Holy Conspiracy.
Yes, and it's a great message. I'm as you're speaking, I'm like, yes, I've always struggled with what I call religion, organized religion, because to me it feels like it's not inclusive, it's exclusive. And there is a bit of the hate and the if you're not this, you're out. I think I was probably late 40s, early 50s. I'm 58 now. I kind of came to spirituality, which kind of opened me up to, like you were saying, the message was more about love, and we are all one and we're connected. And I think that's a beautiful message. If we were really teaching that consistently and getting away from the hate and the separatism, what a beautiful world this would be.
Yeah. Of course, not everyone. I mean, it's not for everyone. And as I said before, this is my perception of the truth, right? So I'm never going to be the person who says like, ooh, I'm the only one who discovered it all and here it is, But what I've found is like a lot of people who might have grown up Christian and then like stepped away from the church because they felt it didn't reflect what they believed was true, or they couldn't connect with it, the message. They read my books and they're like, now I can fall in love with Jesus again, because they see what I'm trying to show is the Jesus message was the one of love, not the one of division. So they can relate to that, and they love it. I thought that more Christians would come and like just hate my book, but what's happened is that some Christians hate my book, but are the ones who haven't read it. The ones who have read it, like even though they completely disagree, they say like, I really like the story. I don't agree with everything, but like I loved it. So that's interesting. But yeah, I get like a little bit of like hate mail from Christians who are or radical Christians who have not read my book, but
I have an opinion about it. I love that. I'm always like,
because they have to be right.
Right. Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk a little bit about your writing process. I always love kind of learning how someone comes to writing and their actual writing. Do you have a specific time that you sit down every day? What's your flow?
So at the moment, I'm still working full time, so on a day job. So I write 1 day a week. So I have either Saturday or Sunday that my husband allows me to write, or I demand it, depending how you look at it. But I have 1 day where I write at least 6 to 8 hours. What I do is I open my computer and I write, even if I don't feel like writing, even though I don't feel anything comes. This is the only time I have to write. So I write. So what I tell myself is that it doesn't matter if it's terrible, whatever happens, but if I put it to paper, then, I can always cut it out later. I can, it doesn't matter. But usually, like, I find that it's actually what I've written when I don't feel like writing is actually good. I don't have time for writer's block, anything like that. I listened to your interview with Mark Clark.
Yes.
And I know he's told me this before, but he meditates before he writes. And I think that's a great idea. So I'm going to try to start doing that. But for me, it's just sit down and do it.
And he kind of said the same thing, that he journals, and no matter what, he may have nothing come out of it, but he starts to write just to get something flowing. But I think he said he does it every single day. When you said you do it once a week, I wondered, do you have things pop in your head throughout the week sometimes where you're like, oh, I got to make a note on that? Or do you find
yeah. And I think it's actually helpful. I've started this routine now since the pandemic started. So I'm working from home. So I live right next to a park, but it's a beautiful park up in Harlem in New York City. And I go out every morning and I take a walk. I look at the leaves and the trees and the flowers and the squirrels. And one day there was a rat, and then people are, walking their dogs, and I just connect. So I have this time, like now, like lately I've been listening to the Abraham conversations, the Abraham Hicks conversation, which has been really good in kind of like lifting my spirit and starting the day off on a positive note. Mm-hmm. But as I do that, I walk through the park, and then a lot of the times, of course, like when you connect with spirit, then you get like, oh, if I put it like this, then like we can resolve this problem, or like if I do it like that, or when I go running. Like I think it's like when you empty your brain, then the messages come, right? So it's super helpful. But I hope to one day write full time.
Yes. Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be lovely? I hope you do too.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into the more spiritual side and the healing you practice. Reiki? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Reiki.
Awesome. What is that exactly? I hear a lot about it. I know nothing about it. I know there is healing, and basically it's like energy is about all I really know. So help me understand that a little bit, because I find it fascinating.
So Reiki is hands-on healing, right? So you channel through your crown chakra, you channel the healing from the universe, you let it flow through your body, out through your hands. So Reiki uses symbols. So you get these symbols kind of implemented in your body, and as you go along, you advance as a practitioner, then you get more and more symbols. And to be honest, like when I started, I thought, oh my God, symbols. This sounds so wacky, but it actually does work. And there is energy in these symbols. So the practitioner who started this is called Dr. Usui. He's from Japan. He was from Japan. He's said long time ago. I think it was also in the 1800s when he kind of stumbled upon this thing. So these symbols you use to kind of like connect, first of all, and then during the practice you can kind of use those symbols to strengthen the flow and strengthen the power, and use different symbols for different kind of healing. So what you do is like, you bring this energy into yourself, and then the person who you're giving healing to lies down on a kind of like a massage table, and then you go to wherever the Reiki energy tells you to go, and the person is fully clothed. So it's not as invasive as massage can be, so it's much more soft. You can also have like some areas like over the chest region or something like that. You don't actually touch, you just hold the hands over. You can do Reiki healing. You can have like a little doll or something like that, and then you can give Reiki through that. So it's really just like the person providing the divine healing energy, the practitioner using their body as a tool to channel the divine healing energy through them to a person.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And I love the thought of that. And you can work on like specific areas on someone, like if they're...
Yeah. So you work on like the body as well as the emotional and spiritual like layers of them. So you can clear like insomnia or depression. Or I worked with a friend who was going through a very, very deep depression in the beginning of the year, just to like, clear out the like cobwebs like inside all the stagnant energy. And he lives in Ireland, so I was in New York City, and I just gave him distant healing. You have to ask permission, you can't send it to anyone. I helped him through it from being completely suicidal to now actually not just me. Let's just make that clear. But I helped him. I was part of the help that he got from being completely suicidal and being like an inch away of like killing himself, to today being in a completely different place with new friends, new positive friends, a new life, being successful and happy. And I mean, it's incredible to think that this happened actually at the Valentine's Day weekend.
Oh, wow.
And I thought he was going to, he called me in the middle of the night and just said like, bye, I'm killing myself now. And I'm like, no, stop. Yeah. It was extremely difficult to be far away. And we have common friends in Ireland. So, of course they helped as well from their side. And I said, I'm doing this. What are you doing? Can you do this? And he's like, okay, can you do this? So like together and with other friends, we helped him through it. And now he has a new set of friends, so he doesn't call me every day any longer, which is good. Like, I'm happy for him, so you can do that. Like you can work on the mental, the like clearing of the mind, and like inserting like new positive energy. I also helped another friend actually who went through a surgery. She had like a tumor on her spine, on the top of her spine, and something went wrong with the surgery. And I gave her Reiki in person that time, and she kind of like vomited up the energy afterwards. Like, it wasn't like, from her stomach. It was like she had convulsions, and she was like, she released something. She didn't know what it was, but like it came out of her. And her mother was like, you have to go to Kristi and get more Reiki. So it can help, but then it's also like when I'm stressed out, like I go to a Reiki practitioner instead of a massage, and I just like, release and relax my muscles and everything like that. So it's, to me, like I love it. Like, I love giving it. I love receiving it. I don't know how it works. I mean, I do, like in theory, like I explained to you, but it's crazy that it does work, but it does work.
Yes, and I've heard wonderful things about it, but I've never really investigated it. So thank you. And now I need to find someone here in my area and just check it out. Do you have any books you're working on now?
Yeah, I'm actually working on something much more commercial because I felt like I just need a break from since I'm not actually religious myself, I needed a break from just the research, the heavy research and stuff, and just write something fun. So I'm writing a story. It's the first book of a series. It's about this girl who kind of loses everything, inherits a house that's haunted, and how she's then started to, she completely does not believe in anything spiritual, but the person who lived there before, who passed away, she has all these tarot cards and stuff, and she keeps throwing them away and they keep coming back into the house. And then she starts she's completely out of money and she's trying to get a job and nobody will give her a job because, it's set in this small town in Connecticut. And it's not season, so nobody has jobs. So she's in the end, she's okay, I'm going to try to read the cards. And then she reads the card and then she's oh my God, this means something. So it's supposed to be a kind of a lighthearted, chick lit kind of with a little bit of spirituality and cozy mystery somewhere. So I'm about 25-30% in, and it's been fun and it's completely less serious, which is good.
Right. Yes. A lot lighter subject matter. It sounds like a lot of fun. Can't wait to read that one as well. Let's do this. Let's tell everybody how they can connect with you, how they can purchase one of your books. I know you have a couple out.
So they can go to my website. Easiest way is theholyconspiracy.com, where I have links to all my books, where you can read more about me. You can also, if you go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or you can even request it from your library. A lot of libraries have my books. Just ask for The Holy Conspiracy. My first book about Jesus in India is called The Transmigrant. But yeah, easiest to go to theholyconspiracy.com.
Okay.
And there you can find all the links to all the different web shops where you can find them.
I love it. Well, then my final question to you is, it's twofold almost, really. What advice would you have for someone thinking about writing, or they feel the urge to write? What would you say to them? And then what message would you just like to leave everybody with on the big discoveries that you found regarding spirituality during your travels and all your research?
What to do if you want to write. I mean, I've written all my life, and I think don't be too self-critical, because everyone's first draft is bad. So if you write something and you're oh, this is not worth anything, keep writing, because you can go back, you edit it, maybe you read some articles or watch some webcasts online, and you learn tricks of how to make it better. But go with what interests you, because and even if it doesn't make sense in the beginning, you can always go back and put the plot in later, or you can write an outline and do it, but just write, and just don't be too hard on yourself, because we're all terrible in the beginning when we start writing. So
that's a great message. That is a great message. Love it. Thank you.
And in terms of spiritual, what I have learned a lot, but
can you condense that into one sentence? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I think it goes kind of along the same lines. It's don't be too hard on yourself. Don't think that you're less worthy than someone else, who some people like to see themselves as gurus, and they say oh, I'm so holy. We are all holy. We all have our demons. We all have our days when we're not fantastic. We all have our times when we're oh, I hate that person. It happens, and it's it's okay. Don't think that you are less than anyone else. at the same time, don't think that you are more than anyone else. We're all equal. We're all sons of God. We're all love.
That's wonderful. And what a great place to end our conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure learning from you about all things spirituality. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing that message with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun. Thanks.
Yes, good. And to all of you, thank you for tuning in, listening, watching. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you next week.